Data, information, facts, and discussion about things that affect you at home and in your business. Welcome to the Conversation Chamber, brought to you by the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce.
Hello, and welcome to the Conversation Chamber. This is a new program by the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce. And the whole purpose of this is to provide some data, some information, and have a conversation around some key indicators that we think that everybody should know about things that affect you at home, us at business, and Bermuda generally. With us today are Mr. Dennis Fagundo, and he is one of the past presidents at the Chamber, and also representing our Economics Committee, Stephen McGinnis. He's going to cover a lot of the technical aspects for us. My purpose in this is that as I was walking around Bermuda, I would hear a lot of opinions around what Bermuda is, what the problems are, and how to fix those problems. The conversations were happening in beauty shops, in barber salons, in boardrooms, in coffee shops, and also across the kitchen tables at home, which is where primarily I learned because I didn't actually have a education that went past high school. The thing I really started to notice was that in a lot of the conversations, there was a huge amount of emotion and a lot of perceptions. And what too often was missing were some facts, some figures, and some simple, basic, hard truth. So we cannot make things better for our families. We cannot make things better for our businesses without some clarity. And what we are hoping to do here today with this program and the future programs that we will be recording and sharing is to provide you with the view that we have based on the information that is readily available to everybody, which is publicly collected. And we hope that what this does is cause you to understand the information both simply, but it also changes the nature of how you talk about the problems as you see them when you think about Bermuda. The very first thing that we should talk about, though, is what is the Chamber?
Founded in 1906, the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce is the island's oldest and largest trade organization, comprising some 500 members, representing virtually every industry sector. With a clear focus on advocacy, networking, communication, and lobbying, the Chamber stands as a singular voice for commerce in the community. Organized by divisions, our members seek to address issues of mutual interest by market sector. The Bermuda Chamber of Commerce is a member of the International Chamber of Commerce and the American Chamber of Commerce Executives. We envision a Bermuda in which business can prosper.
So let's talk about tourism. We showed a slide which identified a number of properties that had closed over the years. And the issue is not really so much that they closed, because to be quite honest, some of them were just renamed and reopened. But it's really the impact of tourism. What's actually going on with tourism? How do we feel about tourists? What do our children think about tourism? I actually asked the question, I actually wonder, when the mother and the father that was working inside these places, they went home, they told their kids, guess what? That hotel's closing down. I can't work there anymore. What did that child feel about tourism? Did they think it was an opportunity for them in the future? What do they feel about service right now? Because, our service levels are just a little bit different than what they were when we grew up. So tell me what you think about service. What do you think about tourism?
I think that we have a tremendous opportunity in tourism. And the slide that shows the trends in accommodation and the trends in financial performance on hotels really speak to the opportunity that's there. And my exposure to tourism, of course, started in the mid-90s and continued through to now. So I've seen it sort of steadily falling off, and that with foresight and with that you can still make a hotel be profitable, that you can still keep people employed, and you can still provide good service, but that it's not an easy thing to do, but it can be done.
I find that a lot of people don't actually run towards tourism jobs anymore. I mean, they don't pay the same. Some people think about servitude rather than service. Some people don't like putting themselves out there in front of others. You hear a lot of different things about it. I think one of the things that strikes me when I was younger is that my mom I used to come home at 10 o'clock after school, and I would smell perfume in the hallway. My mom and dad were going out to the local hotel, and they were dancing in the little club lounge, whatever it was. What happened to the entertainment in Bermuda? A lot of it was hotel-based, but some of it actually wasn't. But right now, people say Bermuda's boring. How do we fix that? And what part does tourism in Bermuda play?
I think there's a bigger question around entertainment, and it's reimagining what entertainment is, what it looks like, and what's effective. What do people actually want to do? What speaks to their soul? The image of going to a bar and sitting to a bar and after work every day and drinking before going home has drastically changed. Some would say very much for the better. The knock-on of that has had a tremendous economic impact on the smaller bars, lounges, sports clubs, community clubs that relied on bar revenue to support their other functions. But people aren't, many would say for good, people don't have those behavior patterns on the whole as they used to. The knock-on effect on entertainment in a broader sense, what does entertainment look like? What does live music look like? And how do we create an environment that speaks to people, that is sustainable and self-sufficient financially?
I remember when I used to go out, when I was younger, I used to go with my parents because they didn't have a babysitter. So the babysitter was wherever we were going. Probably illegal nowadays. But I remember going and hearing the Toba Brothers. I remember hearing that little island sound that kind of made me feel good if I was a tourist. I don't know what our island sound is anymore. I'm not so sure what that is. I see a lot of entertainers that got the digital board and you're doing the same thing that can be done in almost every country. It's economically, it's great. It saves money for whoever the operator is, whoever is hiring that person. But what about that three-piece or four-piece band? If you got a three-piece or four-piece band, how are they actually able to make any money? So how do we get Bermudians to be in music industry, to be in a performance industry, to get in front of people and to be able to make money doing that on a regular basis?
The latest sort of information that I've seen is that there's actually a lot more live musicians in Bermuda than people know about, and that it's more difficult for them to find employment and find things to do than it is that there aren't people there. And so I think there's part of that question is, what does that look like? Comes down to how do you create an environment where entertainment can be successful, back to the kind of the mission of the chamber. And is this there's opportunities there, but how do we facilitate that sort of rebirth, that success in that industry? Because it appears as though there's people that want to be entertained, there's entertainers that want to fulfill that role. How do you put them together in a financially sustainable way?
And if you think about it, so you got a local entertainer that's going to be going all season. How many times can you see them in a year? They might have to have some rotation. They might have to change up their game a little bit. Or we need to have sufficient tourists also coming and watching the entertainment to sustain those entertainers when the locals aren't going there. So I can go see maybe the same program, maybe twice, and then I got some visitors coming. They're going to go again with me, maybe another time. And after that, I'll be like, yeah. But if you've got some tourists that are going out to these clubs or to these shows, I know the Follies used to be on the stage at Hamilton Princess. The Follies, like you would see in Las Vegas. I mean, where's that? We got to do something a little bit more, and we got to figure out how to create an environment, a space that can cause entertainment to be a lot more useful and somehow affordable, while the person providing the entertainment can also get paid and make a living.
Yep.
Tough stuff. Hotels, they come, they go. We have a lot of rooms, and sometimes we don't have a lot of rooms. It's a tough business. Right now, Southampton Princess is closed. And I would think that the rest of the hotels are having a pretty good time because Southampton Princess is closed. So supply and demand.
We're seeing that too as well, Mariko, that like the revenue per available room that hotels are getting is off the charts right now. And there's obviously, they've been able to benefit from a slowdown in the wider hotel industry in Bermuda. and so there's less supply of rooms. And whilst air arrivals might be down as well, the hotels themselves, if they're able to get someone in that room, they are benefiting right now. And we are seeing the revenue uptick along those. And occupancy is also back to where it was roughly in line with where it was pre-COVID. And so if you're able to get a hotel room open and get someone in it, the revenues that you're able to generate from that room are being quite substantially higher than it was pre-COVID.
So two sides to that though, right? One side of that is this is great because we still have some hotel properties that need to be purchased and or renovated and or upgraded. So if we actually can see that some of the hotels are actually making decent money, then that means that hopefully there's a value opportunity for them to want to, or somebody to come and buy a property or spend the money to renovate it.
Yeah, definitely. It makes it more attractive from a developer side of it.
Right.
And then, but obviously we also have to just be mindful of how much can we inch upwards on the RevPAR and the average daily rate numbers too. Because at some point, someone's going to say, is this value for money?
You're basically saying, if you charge too much, maybe we break the elastic band.
Yeah.
So that's where the occupancy rate tells the story, right? So you can see that before the financial crisis, sort of the 2006, 2007, when we hit our peak, sort of as an island occupancy numbers, and then you can see the impact of America's Cup, where the lead up to it and then the sort of the hangover from it, it did its job in many ways, where you continue to really get the higher occupancies and the higher average daily rates in the year or two after. And then we've recovered post-COVID back to the same levels as we were at, sort of with the impact of America's Cup and pre-COVID. So what you'll be able to see is that if the average daily rates creep too high, then you'll be seeing the knock-on effect in occupancy, and you can see that in the data, in the PACE reports, in a real live month by month, week by week type basis from inside the hotel. So anybody that's got any property that has a finger on the pulse of setting rates, setting whatever discounting is going on, and watching the occupancies will be able to optimize that equation to the best of their ability and take advantage of whatever demand is out there in the market.
That sounds really good. Now, I think that's great information for somebody who owns a hotel. How does that affect somebody at home? I mean, really, that means that really I should be able to find a job in hospitality. It means that I should have some secure employment, that the employment's not really going away. Things are looking really, really good, right?
That's what it's looking like.
Yeah.
You're watching The Conversation Chamber, brought to you by the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce.
So that was a great conversation just now about tourism. We've got to talk about transportation.
Yep, let's hit it. So one of the things that we've seen with taxis over the last 10 years is there's 600 permits that are allowed in Bermuda, of which the taxis right now for 2022 that were registered are down to 523. Meanwhile, buses, limos, minibuses, that's actually almost doubled, actually just over doubled from 178 to 285. So that's the landscape, is that we're seeing shrinking taxi usage, increase in minibuses and limos.
And then we also have buses and we also have ferries. So let's talk about the impact of transportation. So people get off the plane, they come out at the airport and, oh my God, no taxis. People get off the cruise ship, they come out, oh my gosh, do I have enough transportation to get where I need to go? Me and my ace girl, we go out, we're gonna have dinner, we're down in St. George's, we're up in Somerset. Can I get home? Can I get a taxi to come pick me up and take me home? Or if me and the boys go out and we had one too many, two too many, three too many, it's a hard day, can we get home or are we drinking and driving? Do we have enough transportation in Bermuda as a system so that this makes sense? Because people complain about transportation. Locals are complaining about it. Tourists are complaining about it. Business people are complaining about it. I'm not so sure that our system as a system right now is working as good as it can. What can we do? What should we be thinking about when it comes to transport?
I think we've got a lot of questions to answer there, and there's some lessons to be learned. If we look at the and Uber's often cited as an example of a bit of a success, right? But Uber didn't change how long it took to transfer to get a vehicle. It didn't change how long it took for that vehicle to get you from point A to point B. What it did was manage your expectations. And I think there's opportunities around all of those systems, with through information technology, through apps, through all sorts of things, to be able to better manage people's expectations, to be able to provide better information, and then for the system to both become more reliable and for it to feel more reliable. We have a bus system that, if it gave the impression of being more reliable, if people were able to get where they needed to go, when they needed to go, and know that they were going to get there, you would find ridership and usage of that system would go up. I think cheaper transportation, more reliable transportation, is also a huge economic enabler. It can drastically decrease the cost of living for the average family if they're able to use public transportation on a more consistent, more reliable basis.
So with the buses, recent information says that we have been able to increase the bus fleet. Some of them are a little bit smaller. Lots of conversation whether they're too small or too big, for sure. But if we can go ahead and cause the bus service to be as reliable as possible, link that up with maybe how the ferries run so that we can actually have a system that works a little bit better and bigger, totally. Some conversation around the schedule. What is the schedule? How useful is the schedule to St. David's or even to Dockyard in some regards, right? What happens when school's in and you try to get on the bus? Those things we probably need to figure out. Uber. Interesting, because, the gig economy, the gypsy cab, come on now. It's for real. It happens. We don't really talk about it. It's a little bit impolite, but exactly what are we doing? They're there for a reason. They must provide some sort of opportunity. They should either be pushed forward and be made part of our system or not, but we need to figure out, how do we measure satisfaction with our transportation system? Because that should be a key indicator. The conversation doesn't make a difference if we're talking about what we think and what we feel. There's got to be some measure of, we are doing better, we're satisfied, we're happy with the taxi service. It takes us this long to get one, and we can get one and get to where we need to go. There is this, or used to be at a time, when I think about my friends that got taxis, a lot of times it was part of my retirement package. I could slow down a little bit, I could hang out with my boys and my girls, and the taxi kind of was a thing that kind of kept me busy for when I wanted to keep busy. But now the taxi has a real need. It's a service. It's not just a retirement. It's not just a different kind of an option. It's not just an asset. We need to have wheels turning so people can get where they need to go. So let's now skip on to housing. Housing is a big one.
Yep. So I think, Marika, I'm going to just walk through a couple of the key issues that we see right off the bat. We're going to jump into some of the trends that we've seen, which is housing. There's been a slowdown of what units are actually being built right now.
Yeah.
So we've seen more recently, especially over the past 10 years now, that the mixture of units being built has shifted dramatically to one bedroom and studio units. The heyday of the 2000 to 2010.
Yeah.
That period where it was predominantly like 2-3 bedroom units being built. That was the condo booms, everything like that. We haven't seen that happen recently now. So it's shifted down. So majority of the units being built right now are 1 bedroom and studios. Coupled with that, we've seen a significant spike of international business activity over the last couple of years now,
Yep.
where the international business sector has actually grown by almost 1,000 jobs in a 4-year period. And that equates to about 440 new non-Bermudian jobs that have been created, and they have to live somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's a significant draw on demand that's kind of been under the radar, that has been clawing up a lot of the demand, along with a significant number of new Bermudian jobs. And obviously, they might be progressing up the property ladder on that too.
So that's a great thing, because if you own a house, you're able to rent that place out, and you're able to get it rented out on a regular basis, and probably at a little bit higher rent rate, right?
Yeah.
So you're making a little extra money in your pocket. But if you're a local person, or I guess maybe a person who's coming to Bermuda to try and find a place, things are a little bit tight. And it's interesting when you say that it's more 1 to 2 bedroom or studio to 1 bedrooms that are being built right now versus 2 to 3, because I don't know, people out there are saying they can't find anything anywhere.
And I'd also say, like, we look back in 2000,
Yeah.
we said that we had a housing issue. 2008, we had a housing issue. 2023, we have a housing issue. So it's an issue that we can't seem to overcome easily.
What's the issue? What's the issue?
Well, it's supply demand. And it's in the 2000s, we were able to build our way out of it. So in 2000, we were able to build our way through it.
Yep.
But now we're stuck where we aren't building that same level of units out there, and we're not able to actually drive that forward.
So Dennis, why do you think we're not building as much?
Well, I think if we look back to that slide that identifies some of the issues around housing, it starts to tell the story where it's not a single. There's no sort of single smoking gun or no single red flag that is driving a problem. There's an accumulation of multiple factors, and the limited new builds, the cost of construction, all of that, and the increase in land pricing. So, and even in the last little while, the increase in cost of capital means that you're not making big money off of building to rent out or building to put on the market. You're not making the profit's not there to be able to facilitate it. So you're seeing less people doing it.
So let's get into this a little bit. So what does rent control mean? Let me talk about missing housing.
Rent control, you've got sort of a couple factors there. So lower end housing that's under the ARV limit, that is where the rent is regulated. At some point, if the regulated rent is lower than the problems that are created for the costs of maintaining that property, then you might be better off not renting it and taking it off the market.
So if somebody has a problem tenant and they don't pay, then you're trying to tell me that it's easier for me to not actually have a tenant in my space than to actually have somebody in the rent control space.
That's some of the feedback that we've got.
Yeah, that's tough. So the Landlord-Tenant Act, what about that one?
That's a similar type of problem. There are clauses within the act that are heavily weighted towards the tenant, and again, we've seen landlords, and we've gotten feedback that there are landlords that are taking units out of the market because it's just not worth it to rent them out.
I heard somebody say, between these two, rent control and Landlord-Tenant Act, I heard somebody say that they had somebody in their space that didn't pay their rent. They kept trying to collect rent 3-4 months. They finally took the person to court, Dennis. And then what actually happened was the judge said, hey, tenant, how much time do you need to get yourself sorted out? The person says, I'll do my best. I think I have myself sorted in 3 months. 3 months pass. They still haven't got any rent. And now this person is suffering because they actually can't afford to pay their mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough spot to be in. So economic investment certificate, what does that mean real quick?
So the economic investment certificate, the British Overseas Territories, the digital nomads are all sort of factors that have increased the demand. And again, that has taken inventory off the market and again creates a shortage.
Yeah, so we have more people coming to Bermuda, more people moving into spaces, and that actually was a good thing because it means the economy is turning over. But it doesn't mean that because we aren't building as many houses anymore, and also because some people are just not renting their spaces, some things are still stuck in probate, that we are just not having access to the amount of houses that were once there. This is a tough situation, especially because the price to build isn't what it used to be. So we've got to figure some stuff out. I don't know if that means that we have to go a little taller than we used to go before, a little wider than we used to go before. People are going to have to start sharing. I don't know what the answer is. This is a difficult one.
You're watching The Conversation Chamber, brought to you by the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce.
One of the things that's been really difficult to answer is how many people are here? How is that changing? Where are they going? Why are they going? So let's start off first with the birth and death rate.
Yeah, so let's go like from a high view on this and take it right back. So we're going back to 1978 here, Mariko, and we're going to see how Bermuda has actually trended over time now. And what we can see is that from 2008 onward, we have had a massive drop off of births in Bermuda. Now, on top of that, we have to remind that not all the births that are happening in Bermuda are actually to Bermudian parents. So when we look at Bermudian births, it's about 80% or so of that. So that's represented in this orange line that we have. Now, the key part is this crossed over in 2013 between the birth rate and death rate when we look at Bermudian births. So from 2013 onward, we've actually had a negative spread.
More people dying than we had babies being born.
Correct, on the Bermudian side of it.
So we got this black line, which actually shows that we have a lot more deaths. I mean, it is what it is, right? People are sort of living longer, and therefore the death rate is going to catch up with us somewhere. But then there is that COVID.
Yep, the COVID spike, and when we're not experts on the death rate side here, but when we just take a simple average over the 5 years prior to COVID, it looks like that over the last 3 years, the deaths have actually been about 25% above that average rate that we would have seen. So that's kind of reflective of what COVID has contributed, what COVID has caused to our death rate in Bermuda.
Sure, and the big issue isn't really the death rate. The big issue is the Bermudian births. There just aren't enough babies coming online. I mean, we had 380. This is an all-time low. So if you take that 380 coming online, it's not really a bad term, really. But if you talk about 380 births, what does that mean for schools?
Yep. So again, we've taken it right back, 1978.
Yep.
And looking at what this means going forward. So you can see that the total school age population that Bermuda's had has dropped from 10,800 to 7,000 over this time period. And within that, we've also...
Number of students.
Yes, correct. Yep. And this is across all the age groups. So we can see that there's a reduction on what our school age populations are too. And obviously this is our future pipeline as we look at it from a workforce development.
Where do you think those kids went? I mean, from 8,800 in public school to 3,719 now. I mean, okay, there's some people being homeschooled, but
they'll still be in that number.
They'll still be in the in the government school number?
They'll be in one of them.
Okay. So then somebody must be going away.
But it's also reflective of the birth rate too.
The birth rate's going to be inside there. We're taking some kids and putting them into some sort of schools overseas. And then that private school number is just growing. It looks like there might be
relatively stable.
Yeah.
But yes, I think what you're seeing is it's a reflection, it's a proxy for the people on the island. So you might have some impact on average family size, driving it down. And then you're also going to have an impact of less people on the island, less workforce, less all of that. So I think you're going to have those two overlapping trends. And you can see it sort of here where we look at the demographic shifts. You can see that play out. Then the less school-age kids, 10 years later, they're the less under 35-year-olds in the workforce, right? So the one line turns into the next line, which then turns into the next line, just sort of in 10 years, 15 years later.
Yeah, and I think on that too is just when we look at the median age of the workforce here, if we go back to 99, it was about 39.6 years old, and now it's at 47 years old. We've only progressed 23 years, and it's almost doubled in that time frame. That just shows how much of a shift we've seen from that 35 and under and the 35 to 44 age brackets shifting upward. And now we're seeing that over 55%, almost 55% of our workforce is actually 45 or older now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wonder what that really means. I mean, changes in technology, the older we get, sometimes it's a little harder to keep up with that change in technology. What does that mean when we give service, when somebody's stepping up and there's a senior? Not to say that seniors can't do. That's not the case. It's just, what is the expectation of service, and what's the expectation of lifting things up and moving things? Or how do we want to serve people? Or what does our guests expect in terms of how we're going to serve them? We are not having any young people.
There's also, I think, again, there's multiple factors there that are driving this picture, right? But you also have changes in the job market itself. So if you have more senior level positions, and you have, through changes in technology or through changes in automation, you have less entry level or mid-level jobs inside an organization, or you've got more smaller organizations than you had before, whether it's in the IB space or the local space, then the fewer entry-level jobs are going to drive fewer people in the younger ages in those jobs. That may mean that it's fewer guest workers in that age bracket. It may mean that there are that Bermudians are not finding work in those categories. But there's certainly more to dig into and more questions to be asked.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too, is when we think about that school age question that we're just looking at the schools, you can also see, because obviously most of the childbearing population is going to be 44 and under. And we can see that that's shrinking as we've gone through the curve. So that's also just that contribution factor on top of it. But this is also a near-term issue that we're going to be seeing playing out over the next 5 years even, because of pensions, the discussion about how that's going to be managed going forward, because obviously the bulk of our workforce that is going to be carrying that weight going forward is in that smaller percentage now.
Yeah, we're not going to actually jump into healthcare, but it is actually true that 80% of your healthcare spend that you're going to spend in your life is in the last 20% of your life. So I actually wonder if any of these numbers in the 65-year-old category, is that people having to work longer, or because the population requires it, or because they need to have more money in their pocket? What's actually happening with them socially at home? The other thing I actually wonder is, do we actually have more kids going overseas to school and maybe just aren't coming back as fast? Maybe there's more opportunity out there. I don't know if there's more money or they're enjoying the world. There's a lot of questions. We got to dig into that data a little bit more.
So if we then move on to the looking at the total number of jobs filled in Bermuda, you can see how it sort of flows on from the death rate, the birth rate, the demographic shifts. They all kind of tie together because obviously they're measuring different facets of the same thing. But the interesting piece here is that we have certain levels of expectations around what we want from our infrastructure. We want a reliable, robust electrical supply. We want reliable, robust medical system. We have, a certain size of government. We have all of this big picture infrastructure that is now being paid for by fewer and fewer people working. So that denominator impact is a very real thing and plays a significant role into our cost of living, because we're taking these big numbers, dividing them by fewer people, so each person's individual share of the pot is getting bigger.
So we need more people so we can all pay less.
Well, we need to make a decision. In some ways, nobody wants to look in the mirror and say we want less service.
Oh, I see.
So you can approach it from either way. It's an equation that has two parts. You can either have a less robust, less reliable electrical service. You can have a hospital that does less things for less people. You can have a smaller government, or you can increase the number of people that are paying for things.
Or we can increase the price.
Well, the price flows from those two pieces of the equation.
So if we don't get more people, we're going to end up having to pay more. If we don't pay more, we might end up having less services.
Yep, exactly.
So it's either a very negative thing or it's a very positive thing, depending on which side that you're on and the decisions that are being made.
I think it's like everything else. You're striving to find the most appropriate balance for Bermuda, for the economy, for the social economic fabric of our society.
So do we fill a pothole? Do I take a payout? Do we get a cash benefit by not paying an additional tax, or do we get more tax so we can actually pay the pothole, fill the pothole?
That's the question.
So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about retail sales.
You're watching the Conversation Chamber, brought to you by the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce.
One of the things that we see on a monthly basis coming out is retail sales index. Now, it's normally in a report. It's got a bunch of numbers to it. It talks about the year-over-year changes, volume numbers, value numbers. But what does it all mean? So for the chamber, we've actually been able to graph this to make it visually easy on the eye to understand what's actually happening here. So what we've taken is the retail sales data, put on a 12-month moving average, taken all the way back to 95. So this way we can see numerous events playing out, and you can see how it's all transcribed throughout the history on the data we have. So you can see that during 9/11 US recession in 2001, that it flatlined on the value part and the volume number was coming down. Now, this volume number is adjusting the value number, being the value, how much you actually spend, the actual cash that you pass across the counter. The volume number adjusts it for inflation. So it's basically the price change that you're seeing within the retail sales numbers. And it's adjusting it to reflect roughly what is that volume number to try to say how many units, the unit number. So you can see during the US recession, financial crisis, how our value number actually started deteriorating. Now, this is also aligned to some of the jobs numbers that we're talking about, and some of the just people in Bermuda dropping. So you can see how closely that's correlated too. But then if we look down at the bottom at retail sales volume, you can see that in 2013, 2014, we're actually operating at lower levels than we were in 95. Fast forward, you can see the bump in COVID that happened. Now, this was largely attributed to a substitution effect that we saw. And it was, as we've talked about, the entertainment, hospitality sectors, that bars and restaurants were closed due to COVID restrictions. People had to go to grocery stores, liquor stores to buy. And that bumped up the retail sales index, because something that's not tracked in the index is actually bar and restaurant activity. So that increase that we saw was actually a substitution effect, which is now stabilized. Long story is, we're seeing it. Right now we're at about 8% down on our retail sales volume number compared to where we were in 95.
So in simple terms, prices are going up, fewer people buying things, fewer people buying things at a higher price.
Yep. Correct.
That's actually not a great thing, because actually what happens is, if too few people buy things, then eventually there will be nobody buying anything, even though that red line was still going up.
Yep.
Nobody would buy anything anymore.
Yep. Correct.
All right. So I wonder how we have to change that. So what do you think the average person feels like about the amount of money that they have to spend?
Well, obviously this shows that their money that they're spending isn't going as far, especially in the post-COVID environment.
Yeah.
You can see that the value number has been increasing rapidly, but the volume number has been dropping. So that's implying that people are spending much more. Now, when we look at it from a standpoint of what does it actually mean to the economy, we're looking at what does jobs look like? Because ultimately this is where the how many jobs are in the economy to, first off, buy stuff, but then also what's the retail impact from that. So looking at the data, we can see that the volume trend roughly ties to the number of people working in Bermuda. So that's what we're highlighting previously, is that the volume of retail sales is heavily impacted by the number of people in Bermuda, and it's closely tied to what we're actually seeing on the ground.
So you said the number of people in Bermuda. What actually is the impact of somebody ordering online and having to come to Bermuda Courier?
Yeah, so that's something that we've spent a fair bit of time trying to identify and look into more. So we can see that in the post-COVID environment, well, during COVID and post-COVID, obviously there was a big boom in online shopping and shipping items in. And largely this was also because COVID caused a number of stores to have to either have restrictions in place or they weren't able to open fully. So there wasn't that ability to shop as easily. Sure. So people became easier with online ordering. And we can see from the data movements that we are seeing that there's been a 57% increase since 2018 now on personal imports.
Yep.
That's from couriers, airports, sea shipping, versus a 21% decline on the apparel stores retail sales index.
Let me tell you something. Every time I go away, I find myself walking through a grocery store. And why am I going? I walk down the grocery aisle and I walk down that cereal aisle. Why? Because they have all this stuff that we never see in Bermuda. All this new stuff and, limited time only cereals. I don't know why I'm looking at the cereals. This is a young person to be coming out, I guess. But my question is this. How does online shopping affect the quantity, the variety, or even the quality sometimes of what's available in Bermuda? Can you find what you're looking for in Bermuda if you're going to go to a store? If you have so many people online shopping, how does this store owner keep the inventory they need to keep in stock so that you have what you want when you want to get it in Bermuda? What do you think, Dennis?
I think that that's exactly the question, and it's part of that. It's part of the big picture, right? I mean, it's a system of all of these moving parts and how they work together. So if the consumer shifts away from the bricks and mortar store and away from being able to walk in the store and buy something off the shelf, the more, as that trend continues and as that shift happens, it becomes more and more difficult for the store owner to invest in the inventory, to have the capital sitting there, to have paid duty ahead of time on that merchandise sitting on the shelf, to then hope that somebody comes along to buy it. And that's exactly the impact you'll see. Now, there's an argument that we're used to having too much variety, and that there's an impact on our cost of living of a level of expectation that, one could argue that, most shampoos do the same thing, and I would advance that argument regularly, and I get told off for it by those that know more about shampoo than I do.
Well, you know more than me.
But there's an impact on inventory levels. There's an impact on the cost of the business to hold that inventory that is driven by variety. So if there isn't enough sales to support that, then you're going to see the variety drop. I mean, it's just a necessary thing.
Yeah, so then there's going to be a knock-on effect on the number of people in Bermuda that are going to have a job. Because if you're bringing them by courier, nobody needs to be here. That means so you're not going to have the variety that you want necessarily. Or we all, as a community, need to accept that there will be less variety. We have to accept that we may not get the size that we want, or we have to special order it, or there actually might have to be a higher cost. Because if the thing sits on the shelf longer, that means that the person that's selling it, they need to sell 3 in a week, but they're selling 1 in a week. The price has to be a little bit higher. So people keep wondering, why are things so expensive in Bermuda? It's expensive because you have to import something. It's got to sit on the shelf. You got to pay a duty on top of a lot of things. It sits on the shelf until somebody comes along and buys it. Even worse, nobody buys it. And then it has to be either discounted, trashed, or wasted. And then the next one is being sold has to be sold at a higher price to make up for that first one that was fresh.
So it's exactly, at its core, it's exactly the same mathematical problem as what we talked about with infrastructure. So you have the infrastructure of the store, and if you have less people buying from that store, you have less transactions to divide out the cost of operating the store over. So, I mean, you'd be familiar with it from a restaurant perspective or anything else, right? So the volume of sales is going to be a key driver in what that cost is, the operational cost that has to get divided out over each of those transactions in order to make the store be able to break even or cover its costs.
Stephen, can you make some more sense out of the retail sales index for us?
Yeah, sure, Marika, because we talked about the difference between value and volume numbers.
Now, what is value and what is volume?
So value, again, is the amount of money, think of it, that you actually transact with, the amount of money you're passing over the counter.
Yep, what I pay.
Yep. And the volume number is adjusting it for what the price change is, taking it back to a base period and saying, so we can figure out roughly the equivalent of how many units are actually being sold. So
simply, value would be what I pay, how many dollars, and volume would be the number of the.
Yep.
Great.
That's the easy way to think about it. So one of the numbers that doesn't get talked about, though, is that there's a price change within that index that we can calculate. So for the chamber, for our economics committee, we've been able to actually recreate what that price change impact is. And we've also adjusted it for some demonstration here where we've removed the building supplies and motor vehicles from the retail sales index for this purpose. Because largely people aren't using that money on a monthly basis. And what we wanted to do is try to capture what a monthly expenditure might look like based on retail sales activity.
So what does it look like? Tell us what this means.
So basically, we've all seen that cost of living, and there's been a number of challenges around prices that have seen increase dramatically. This is actually showing us that, and for December 2022, that the retail sales index cost price change was actually 9.1% year over year. On the food store side of it, so this is grocery stores and anywhere that's selling food, it actually was 13.7% for that same month. Now that was the peak of this movement. So that's just reflective of that difference between the value and volume numbers again. And it just shows that this is more of a real-time measure of what the price impacts are that you would be seeing when you're walking around the aisles in the stores. Because this will demonstrate based on changes to customer behavior. It'll show the changes to inventory mix. So this is going to be more of a live dynamic of the price that you're going to actually see.
But we've also seen that much of this is sort of imported price changes, as most of the food in the stores, for example, is imported. It's not produced and produced and purchased locally. So you're seeing that this mirrors very closely the same sort of fluctuations in our trading partners.
Yep. And I'll just add to it as well as this is looking at year over year numbers. Now, if we take it and we actually look at what it means compounded, because we have to also think price changes don't just happen in isolation. They happen if it's 2% one year, then 3% the year after, 4% the year after that, it's all building up. So what we've shown is how does this look over time? So if we look at, for example, our retail sales price curve, we're seeing that the prices have actually increased about 17% from December 2020 through to August 23.
Thanks, Stephen. I mean, you know, these charts, a lot of information inside here. One thing everybody knows is that the prices of food are going up. The prices of most everything in Bermuda are going up. We've got to figure out how do we actually get that down to be lower. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks, you guys, for joining us and having this conversation. Be watching for more on the Conversation Chamber, where we break down the data a little bit more, provide you with information, hopefully a lot of useful commentary. We can't wait to receive your questions and be able to talk more about this stuff.